Hey, it's the Profit Answer Man, Rocky Lalvani. If you're new to the podcast, check out my interview with Mike Michalowicz. It's episode number 2. If you want to hear about each chapter in the Profit First book, go back and listen to episodes 3 through 13. Episode 1 is the why and how. On the Profit Answer Man, we learn money mastery without all the complicated accounting mumbo-jumbo using a simple system. Your accountant is busy documenting your transactions and creating a rearview mirror of what happened. My guess is you don't even look at the reports they sent you. If you're like most business owners, you struggle with this, and it's not your fault. We aren't taught money in school, and accountants aren't taught how to be profitable. The Profit First system created by Mike Michalowicz works, and he certified me to help you implement the system in your business. Remember, the new equation is sales minus profit equals expenses. Let's face it, without cash flow, you can't pay your employees, buy needed materials, or pay your mortgage and support your family. I help you to do that and more, so you can focus on the parts of the business you love and receive the rewards for your labor and investment into your business. The stronger you are as a business owner, the more jobs you create, the better we are as a country. Small business owners are the backbone of America, and for that, you deserve to be well rewarded. Just remember, more revenue does not equal more profit. That's why we focus on the bottom line. Did you get a chance to listen to the episode with John Patrick Morgan and how he used Profit First to buy his dream house in Hawaii? It's episode 90. Amber is the Profit First professional who helped him to do that. And now she's here today to share her wisdom with you. We chat about how to think about your business and figure out how to make it more profitable. You can implement these techniques on your own. She will share her 5 components to ensure that you have a profitable and sustainable business. Amber Duggar is the founder of Profit for Keeps, host of Profit for Joy TV. She's an international speaker and CEO of Amber Duggar Coaching. She helps entrepreneurs around the world become permanently profitable, which results in significant increases in both personal and business net worth with a system and strategy that's simple and easy and takes 10 minutes a day. Let's meet Amber. Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Amber Duggar. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you so much, Rocky. I'm so happy to be here.
And I'm excited to chat with you. Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Sure. So I honestly thought I would never touch finance again with a 10-foot pole when I left corporate. My degree's in finance, my background's in finance, and I was very ready for something different. I felt like my soul was dying a bit every day in my cubicle. And I became a certified health coach and very quickly moved to Bali, Indonesia. And it was in Bali that I began to realize the massive gap that we have between incredibly impact-driven entrepreneurs and empowerment around living a life free of overwhelm and anxiety around money. And so I just started being invited to Skillshares to show the system I was using in my own business to be able to do visa runs and massages and things like that, and not feel super stressed that I was running out of money. And what I realized in those conversations was money truly is 99% behavioral and emotional. And the coaching background and certification that I received really helped me learn how to listen. And through those sessions, I recognized that, wow, this is such a huge problem. And so many people were asking about it. So I very quickly moved into more of this holistic money coaching. And I was working with health coaches, and my business coach at the time actually told me about this book that had been self-published. And she's like, it's making all the rage in all the different Facebook groups. I don't know who this guy is. I can't pronounce his last name, but I think you should read it. And I read the first 3 chapters and already knew exactly how I was going to tweak the system I was teaching. And it was from there that the framework that we now have was born.
And that book was Profit First.
Heck yes.
And it's a game changer. And I think a lot of people don't understand this is not a accounting book. It's a money mindset book. It's how you think about your business differently, how you think about profit and spending, and just kind of changing that whole relationship.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it's also truly about what actually matters when it comes to money versus, I believe, from my experience in my financial background, there's a lot of unnecessary complexity to money and a lot of ego involved around money. And when we remove all of that and even remove the numbers portion of it and think that even just 100 years ago, most of us were tangibly handling money. We can all count. All of us can count. And so when you hear someone say, oh, I'm not a numbers person, I feel for them because it truly isn't about the numbers. It's about organizing your resources. And that's where we really try to keep it. It's just as simple as possible and remove all of the drama around money.
That's how you used to pay your doctor. You'd bring him a chicken.
That's right.
A different world. Then you had to trade the chicken for something else, and that got complicated. So they came up with money.
I guess that's our human nature to complicate everything, right?
It is. I always say, life is pretty simple. Doing simple is hard. And I think when it comes to money, there are a whole bunch of societal pressures, societal expectations, and even just, the concept of, and you mentioned this when we were chatting before the call, of money being neutral, whereas everyone is emotionally charged with money and putting all of these labels and feelings on it.
Absolutely. And if you're listening to this, trust me, you're not alone. We all have that in some shape or form. We have subconscious bias around money paradigms that we picked up as children. And I think the problem, and what I'm so grateful, Rocky, that you're doing, is opening up the doors to have these conversations, because money has been such a taboo topic to talk about. So not only do we have all these emotions associated with it, but we also feel like we must be the only one dealing with this because no one else talks about it.
We do. It's
right.
funny when you think about business and people say you have to work hard to make money, and that automatically makes these people work hard, and then they struggle with their money. It's like, no, you don't have to work hard to make money. Let's make this simple and easy.
Yes, I call that striving yet never arriving.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, our words are so powerful, and also these societal beliefs that are ingrained in us, especially at a certain generation after the Great Depression. That was what we were taught: work hard, play hard. If you're going to get paid money, work hard and do that. And so breaking some of those subconscious patterns is one of the best things you can do to elevate your set wealth point.
And that's so true. One of the ways that I do it with my clients is we always like to reverse engineer their business. And we start with the end in the mind. What do you need for your life? How much time do you want to put into this business? And usually the answer is lots of money and lots of time for me. And then we sit down and we reverse engineer the whole process and go backwards. What have you found with regards to reverse engineering the business?
I think it's the only way to do it. And that's why I was so honored to be on your podcast, because we are so aligned. I don't believe that it makes a lot of sense to make micro adjustments and in hopes to possibly get to a certain point. I think it's really important to look at the bigger picture and say, regardless of what your situation is right now, recognize that our thoughts become our reality, that we truly have this creative mechanism within us to be able to create that which we want to feel into, experience. And so I think that by starting out with, how do we want to feel? What do we want to experience? What do we want to be able to do with our loved ones and those we care about? And then what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? And look at it from a practical standpoint, the expenses, reverse engineering the goal. but also be looking at the business model and making sure that it aligns with the revenue that's required to run that type of business.
Sometimes it's surprising. Sometimes we'll do that and they'll look at me and go, this is not a good business idea. Because they see that they're always going to have to struggle because there are constraints outside of our control. And unless they can figure out a different way to do it, it's just not even worth the effort.
Absolutely. I call this really at times a rip off the Band-Aid moment when we have these conversations. Because, I always remember this story of what's the most important thing that one needs to have or do to escape prison? You know the answer?
To escape freedom?
Yeah, for me, I thought originally when I heard that question, well, you need a key, like you need to be able to get out. And that wasn't the answer. The answer was you need to know that you're there. And so this awareness piece is so essential, yet typically very painful to recognize that, oh my gosh, everything I've put into this business is never going to get me where I think I need to go. And it's that breaking, that striving yet never arriving, but actually having concrete evidence in front of you that is showing you this is why I'm exhausted. This is why I feel like I'm on a hamster wheel. And while the initial rip off the Band-Aid moment is not all that great, I always recommend one after doing something like this to go on a walk, to do something that just completely allows their mind to go into a diffuse state. And ideas are going to start forming and start popping into your mind, because whenever we identify a problem and recognize that a solution is very different than what we were aiming for originally, that's when that creative mechanism pops in. And that's when we really start to see things from another perspective. And that's the first step, is that awareness that, wow, what I thought was going to get me there isn't happening. But who would want to stay in that state of unawareness? Not me.
Not me. Sometimes we need to have our eyes opened. And there's two sayings that kind of pop into my mind. One is, what got you here won't get you there. And so you have to constantly be reevaluating. But what you're basically saying is, hey, we need to work on our business, not in our business, right? And that's the end of the day, is to think about your business and how to make it better and how to improve and how to take little steps towards it, because baby steps add up quite dramatically.
Couldn't agree more.
So you have a system, you talk about 5 components of running a profitable, sustainable business. What are these 5 components?
Well, it starts with what we were just talking about. So the very first thing is having a revenue goal calculator. And what this does is it ensures that you are striving to bring in more money than you're spending, because while someone can say I'm not a numbers person, I think we all can agree that if we're spending more than we're making, we're going to have a problem over time. And so having a revenue goal calculator that is truly reverse engineered based on what's most important to all of us, which is, what are the resources that need to come into my personal life to do the things that I really desire? And what are the resources required from a business standpoint to allow that to happen? So the reverse engineering of the revenue goal is the number one thing. And this also allows you to feel like you have some control when you may feel out of control with the money, and make you feel more safe and secure knowing that now I have the information that I need to actually figure out what a business model would look like for that revenue goal. And it gives you a tangible goal that you can really work towards with confidence. I think many people who don't have this reverse engineered revenue goal tend to strive for a particular milestone. For example, when I was in a coaching environment, one of my first business coaches, she teaching health coaches how to make 5K months. And I was living in the DC area at the time. And if you're familiar with the cost of living in DC and me being the sole provider for myself, 5K was going to significantly put me in the hole. And so I said, well, I really need to minimum make about 8K months. And she said, well, let's be realistic. And that was actually what prompted and planted the seed of what I do now, because I think so many business coaches have the best intentions, but don't necessarily recognize or even know how to reverse engineer the goal. So that's the first one, is making sure that we're actually aiming for a number that makes sense for our life. And my life is going to look very different than someone living in Southeast Asia, someone who lives in Oklahoma City. It just all looks different. The second one is a revenue forecast tool. So I like to look at revenue both from a quarterly, annual, and monthly perspective of cash in, because it does not matter how big your launch was. If you received $10,000 this month in actual payments, and let's say you had a $250,000 launch, well, our brain is so efficient and great at saying, well, we booked $250,000. Let's go buy that Tesla. Teslas are more than 10 grand last time I checked. So having a forecast that actually shows you, okay, so my goal is $25K a month. My payment plans are adding up to $19,000 a month. I have a $6,000 gap. What can I start thinking about that my team can start focusing on to bring in a minimum of that much revenue this month? And of course, you can start to build it out. So you're becoming less reactionary and more really in a strategic, forward-thinking vision. So that's the second thing. So far, the revenue goal calculator and then the forecast tool. The third thing is what I call a spending plan, a personal spending plan, AKA the bad word budget. Everyone hears budget and they go running. So if you're listening to this and going, oh God, she said that word, just know that it truly is a permission granting tool. It allows you to really plan and strategically allocate your resources in a way that you can go and treat your best friend to that massage on Friday because you have that money allocated. You can take your dog to the vet when your dog is all of a sudden not feeling well, and you don't have to feel this pang of guilt like, oh, where am I going to take this from? So a spending plan is very, very helpful, and it ensures that you won't sabotage your newfound profitability by figuring out how much you want to actually be making and what that forecast looks like. And also it gives you much more confidence in just settling the nervous system that you actually have money for the things you care about most. So far we have the revenue goal calculator, the forecast tool, and the personal spending plan. So if you have a personal spending plan, then of course we want to have a business spending plan. And that I believe very strongly in components of Profit First. And so really it's a similar thing, but a forward-looking perspective of an envelope system that allows you to really plan for your taxes, really plan for your business expenses, and still have enough money for paying yourself consistently, even when you have variable months. Because once you've set that goal from the revenue goal calculator, you're going to be able to say, okay, I actually exceeded my goal. I'm still going to pay myself the amount that I said I wanted to spend. So if next month you have a lower month, you still have some buffer to still pay yourself that consistent amount. And the fifth and final thing is truly just having this kind of ties everything together in that you have a clear blueprint of the things that you really love to do. And I call this profit for joy. And so once you've stabilized everything, it's so important to see, what is it that I want to do with the extra money that's coming into my business? Are there impacts or causes that I want to contribute to? Do I want to purchase a house for my parents? Do I want to be able to take my mother on that trip to Paris that she's never done? These things are so beautiful when we have a clear plan of how we want to utilize the resources that come in, because I believe so strongly that if we create space for the things we really care about, just like the universe with everything will fill that space. And so the more we've thought that through, it allows us to have that beautiful foundation, not have the debt, have the accumulated wealth, but at the same time be spontaneously generous, be kind, be able to contribute to causes that really matter.
And I agree with everything that you talk about. It's a lot of that is the way I lived my life before Profit First. And when I heard about Profit First and I read it, I was like, but what do you mean business owners aren't looking at their finances? What do you mean they don't understand the business of business? This is absurd. And that's when I realized, okay, now I get it. This is how I can help people. And and make a difference. And it's been quite a bit of a learning journey. And like you, I didn't want to reinvent the wheel. So that's why I partnered with Mike, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey from that standpoint. But you have to put all these things together. You have to think through it. I think, well, I had 2 calls today, and both calls, it's this same conversation. What's the end goal? How are you? Both of them are very, actually, all 3 of the calls today were that we're working backwards to managing time, right? So you have the money, but we're not going to trade all our time for this money because we want to go live life. And so how do we figure out how to optimize that so that we do have the ability to do that and the ability to say no so that you can say yes to the things that are more important in your life?
Absolutely. I mean, time is more valuable than money. And I always keep that in front of me because, yes, in the very beginning, when you're first starting, it makes sense to put in your time when you don't have as much resources. But at a certain point, it's so important to start recognizing how valuable your time is and that we don't get it back.
So what do we do when we're trying to implement Profit First and we don't have as much money in the spending account as we should?
I think we probably both get this question almost every day. And I really feel for the person asking the question because it's definitely not a good place to feel into. And so I first just recommend that wherever you are in your financial journey, that reminding yourself of giving yourself grace in this process and recognizing that you've never made a bad decision. And the reason I say that is you cannot make a bad decision when you know you're making the decision with the information you have at hand at the time. And so as you move along in your journey and you start to learn more, you can make decisions that are now based and supported on new information you gained. So that's the first thing. First of all, just forgive yourself, give yourself grace, and know that it's okay if you continue to beat yourself up because that's our human nature. But by catching it quicker, it really will help in the long run. The second piece is really going back and listening to what we just mentioned a minute ago. It all comes down to that revenue goal. And Rocky and I both, we know that this is the number one thing that I think no one's really talking about. It's rare to meet someone that's so aligned, Rocky. So I just have to say kudos to you for getting it. Because I think we have a big hill to climb in terms of truly shifting the perspective around what's most important with money, because the financial industry has absolutely failed us. They have used so much provocative and psychological language to really persuade people to think that it is a really good thing to just start with a big loan. And the educational system has failed us because this is not taught in schools. So all of these things we need to keep in mind when we're going through this process. But when we look at, okay, why aren't there enough money in the expense account? Well, it's typically because just like if you were doing a math problem or using rocks and separating them out into the different piles, when we don't have the right amount to start with, and we're still using set percentages, it's just inevitable we aren't going to have enough in the expense account. So what I always suggest when someone's in this position is to truly reverse engineer the goal and see what we can possibly suspend temporarily and then run another revenue goal, because that sometimes we'll find, okay, well, if I decide to just stop these things for the interim, that could get me to where I actually have enough money for these things. Or you could, with awareness, use a bit of leverage to help you move into the right direction. But this way you're conscious about what you're actually putting into debt versus just deciding, you know what, I'm not a numbers person. I'm not looking at this anymore. Really being able to start to navigate what it looks like to hit that number. But ultimately, there's no magic wand. It's not like all of a sudden there's one answer that's just going to get you the right amount in the expenses account. It's really a process. And I've seen so many individuals go through this process feeling like they're never going to get out of debt. And the number one thing that I share that is honestly counter to what you'll hear a lot of the time. And it is, as entrepreneurs, we need more than $1,000 emergency fund. You hear that, save the $1,000 and then start paying down debt. I actually recommend that you halt all debt payments and save 2 months of living expenses before starting to pay down debt. And the reason for that is, one, as human beings, we're very efficient with our resources. So if we receive a windfall of money, the very first inclination is to pay off a debt that we have. But unfortunately, while as good intended intentions that there are with that, we will inevitably have something pop up, which I call true expenses, like a 6-month insurance bill, or your child all of a sudden fell and cut like her arm open and it's going to be an extra amount of money at the hospital. These things happen. Life happens. It's not something that we necessarily plan on. And so without having that, we could then immediately have to put it back on a credit card. And then psychologically, we now have identified as someone who just always has debt. So by really saving that 2 months first, it allows us to actually feel like, oh, I have money here. I'm going to now pause the debt payments again. I'm going to use the money that I have set aside, and then I'll build that back up before I continue paying down the debt.
And we do have a tendency when we get those large windfalls to blow it all. We don't realize that, life is like waves. It's up and down, and we need to plan for the down too, because it's going to happen, especially with business cycles. I think this last time around, it got a little crazy in that the government is handing out money to everybody, but at some point, we're going to have to pay those bills back. And if the economy goes into a slump, you have to be prepared for it. And we haven't had a good down cycle in the business world, I don't think, since 2008, which is long overdue. So it's coming. When? I have no idea when, but be prepared that this is just what happens. It's kind of like summer and winter, right? Winter happens. That's a little more predictable.
And it's so important to know that in those times that it allows us to do more of a reflection and allows us to do more foundational building. And there's reasons for the down. And it was sometimes, I think, put a negative or positive spin on one or the other. There's some great things about when we're up, and there's also some negative things about when we're up. There's some great things when we're down, and also some bad things. And I think even in the last couple of years, it really demonstrated to me just such a tangible thing to talk about when it comes to what is this profit accumulation for? That's probably one of my biggest questions that people ask me. And it was just so obvious to me that, if we had a bit more of this education out there and more influence in this being a normal thing to do, 6 months of being home wouldn't even make a blip for individuals. And we have the abundance and the ability and the acumen and the intelligence to do this. But without it being a social norm and it being something that we truly are encouraged to do, we will continue to be in a state of paycheck to paycheck type mentality. And it's probably the thing that's causing some of the most stress, which then I believe really causes a lot of havoc within the body.
It's going to be a tall order to overcome. There's so much marketing out there and so much pressure to buy, and that it's a lot you have to overcome to just say, hey, I have enough and this is good. And I'm just going to enjoy it. And yes, you build your wealth so that you can weather storms, because they're just part of life, and they're a lot easier when you have yourself on a solid foundation.
It is. And I think that anyone can start today with that. And it's a very simple, free thing to do. And it's probably the most impactful thing. And it's something that I very much struggled with when I was in corporate, and it is gratitude. And it's such a simple yet extremely powerful process. And when we look at it from a perspective of, wow, look at this abundance that's around me. And what I have in my life and the love I have in my life, and whatever it is that you have, really focusing on that and not the lack, you already start raising your vibration that then brings more of that type of energy into your life.
So very true. Is there anything we should have touched on today that we didn't get a chance to?
I would say the one thing that I always like to just mention is many people come to me saying, my bookkeeper is horrible. She did not help me figure out that I needed to put money aside for taxes, and, that how am I supposed to pay myself consistently? And just know, unless you're working with a profit first bookkeeper, the bookkeeper's scope of work doesn't include that. And as the visionary and the CEO of your business, recognizing, and trust me, this is not your fault. This is something that I think I talk about at least once a week. But the function of bookkeeping is to track a historical account of everything that's happening in your business so that your tax professional can determine that you don't pay a penny more or a penny less in taxes based on current tax code. And so everything is very complicated to fit in with the tax entity's way of wanting to see that reporting. Cash flow management, profit first, organizing your money, whatever you want to call it, is a very different skill. And I believe that cash flow, being the number one reason that small businesses go out of business, is directly related to the fact that we do not have a cash flow management officer in our C-suite. Our chief financial officer, they're a glorified controller 99.9% of the time. They're helping the controller and the accounting department fix all of the snafus with accounting software. That's what they're doing. They are not looking forward. And so what I really want you to take away today are two things. One, gratitude is the most abundant skill that you can possibly employ in your daily life. And two, that as a visionary, cash flow management is a $10,000 an hour task. It's incredibly empowering. It's incredibly stress and anxiety reducing. And it allows you to see real-time data and take back ownership of your vision, and knowing that by having that revenue goal and having that forecast will allow you to really see what really matters in terms of what things you need to direct your team or yourself to do to hit those goals. And then everything becomes much easier for you.
And we've talked about cash flow management and forward cash flow planning. It just amazes me that when you look at the accounting systems, none of them really focus on cash flow management. And none of them, there's no easy way if you run QuickBooks to say, show me what my cash flow is going to be for the next 90 days. It's not going to answer that question for you. And it barely answers the question of where did my cash go in the last 90 days? It's not going to show up on a single report. You have to learn how to read all the different reports and figure out how that actually occurred. So it's a shame that the accounting system wasn't designed to help you. It was designed so we can pay taxes.
Absolutely. And for those that are wondering, like, oh, shouldn't I understand my balance sheet and my P&L and all of this? I don't believe you do. I don't think that there's any reason for anyone to do their own bookkeeping unless you absolutely love it and you have your own bookkeeping agency. And understanding the financial statements, unless you're an analyst and you're working with bigger companies, it's not very helpful. The things that I listed below or before, and what Rocky teaches and preaches as well, is really what you want to be focusing on to be able to run a profitable, sustainable business. And then your accountant's going to be calling you, like mine did, and say, what in the heck are you doing? Like, you are so profitable. How are you doing this? And it's one of those inevitable things when you do the reverse engineering.
And that's the way I built my business. I reverse engineered the entire system. If people would like to learn more about your programs and what you do and find you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Well, we always love supporting individuals in our community. So we have a community, and you can go to amberdugger.com/community. If you're really interested in going through a comprehensive free workshop on how to reverse engineer your goal, set up all of your different expenses and really see the true picture and run different variations of your goal, We have workshops often. It's called the Aged Money Challenge, and you can go to amberduggar.com/challenge. And if you're simply just wanting to reverse engineer your revenue goal and not have the support of the workshop, then you can go to amberduggar.com/calculator, and we have that available as well.
And I will put all of those in the show notes to make it easy for people to find them. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Rocky. It was a pleasure. And to all listening, thank you for your beautiful time. It's so valuable. And I truly hope you found something useful from this conversation.
Thanks for listening today. My name is Geeta. I am one of the Profit First professionals at Profit Comes First, the company that hosts this podcast. Each week, I jump on at the end of the episode to give you an action challenge or a key idea to think about over the course of the week. Amber and Rocky discuss several ideas today pertaining to how we think about our business and our money. It's easy for money to become an emotional topic, and also for us to get overly attached to certain parts of our business, or even to view our past decisions too harshly, even though we did our best with the info that we had at that time. This week's action challenge is twofold, and both parts focus on mindset. The first part is to honestly just take a breath and remember that you've come so far to get to this point. The way that we talk to ourselves about our past, where we are in the present, and what we think could be in the future has a huge influence on the way that we live our lives and run our businesses. Just like Amber said in her closing, gratitude is an important part of this. Sometimes it's hard to extend ourselves grace for making the best decisions with what we had because we're in a different or a better place now. So this is your reminder to lean into that this week. The second part of this week's action challenge is to think about that information that you do have now and leverage it for the future. As Amber and Rocky discussed, reverse engineering is one tactic that you have available to you to grow your business. This typically includes working backwards from the goal you want to get to, and it could also include a thought experiment about what you would do if you were your business's top competitor that was determined to put you out of business. Based on the opportunities and possible strategies you identify, you can start making small changes to your business. You can check out Amber's free resources in the show notes to help with this process. If you want a done-for-you service, you can hire us as your chief profitability officers. You have your own area of expertise, and maybe you want to spend more of your time doing what you love. We only work with a handful of clients, so they all get our full attention. We work with business owners who have or are growing to $500,000 to $5 million in revenue. You can use the scheduling link in the show notes to get on our calendar for a good fit conversation to see if we're the right people to support you and how we can help you.
Hey, it's Rocky. Don't forget to check out my other podcast, Richer Soul, where we talk about life beyond money and how to live that ultimate life and become a better leader in your company. As we close out, let's repeat the mantra. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. Have an abundant and profitable week.